An open letter has been written to the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, on projects funded with taxpayers' money by the governorship candidate of the Action Democratic Congress ADC in Lagos State, Mr. Funso Doherty. The letter, which was shared via X, formerly Twitter, analyzed the registration of public procurement awarded by the state government for the second and third quarters of 2023.
Mr. Doherty, who is a chartered accountant and politician, says he reviewed the period of April to September 2023 and noticed some worrying discrepancies which led to the eventual letter. He listed some projects awarded by the state government that, according to him, will require greater scrutiny. Now, let's take you through some of these projects. He did talk, of course, about the construction, supply, and installation of operation and maintenance O&M infrastructure of LRMT Blue Line Phase 1, from phase 1 to Marina to Mile 2, and this is of course by the Lagos Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. There were also complaints about the awards. There was the rehabilitation and reconstruction of Etiosa-Lekki-Epe Expressway Phase 2 from Green Springs to Ibrahim Adesonya, Etiosa, and Ibeju local government area. And the complaint was that this single award for the repair and upgrade of a section of an already existing road amounts to approximately half of the entire 2023 budget for the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. And finally, there are more others, but we'll just look at the Office of the Chief of Staff, the supply and distribution of 2,000 Noila chicken across the local government areas and wards in the state, and the procurement of a brand new Lexus LX 600 bulletproof sport utility vehicle for use in the pool of Office of Chief. This, he said, it is not clear why the Office of the Chief of Staff should be engaged in supplying and distributing chickens across the state. And he also said that this appears excessive and is out of tune with both the prevailing economic circumstances and mood of the people, and it should be scrutinized as to the need and justification for such vehicle purchase and also value for money.
There is, a lot more that was detailed in his letter to the governor. There's, of course, consultancy services that are as high as 5 billion naira. That were stated. If you look at the document, it says consultant services for the detailed engineering, design, and supervision of construction of quality bus conductor package, and it was 7.3 billion naira. The next one there says consultant services once again for the engagement of loan facilitator and advice on LRMT Blue Line project for more than 2 billion naira. It's a lot of it. There's also parts where there's payments being made to lawyers to defend the governor at the tribunal, and it was clear that that definitely, a lot of people were even saying that should be an impeachable offense, because the state government's fund should not be used to defend the governor in court. I think the Labour Party candidate, Gbadebo Rodsviver, did also react to that, saying that he was suing the governor and suing the APC, and he wasn't sure why funds from the Lagos state government and taxpayers' money was being used to pay for the legal fees of the governor, amongst other things that were, on that list that were just very, very, to a large extent, shocking. Money, 30 million naira being allocated to the wife of the deputy governor, 500 million naira used to renovate a church, and many things that, if you look at it, it's just really, really shocking, like I said. We hope that we can get Mr. Funso Doherty here to, of course, join us in Breakfast Central. However, joining us to look intently at this from a public communications angle is public affairs analyst and political analyst, Ayo Adio. Good morning, Mr. Adio. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the program. Interesting morning in Lagos. Interesting weekend we had also, scrutinizing these documents and looking at these details. There's also been attempts to flip the conversation away from what really should be spoken about and start talking about other things. But let's get your thoughts, first of all, on the revelations from this, procurement document. And remember that this is just for 2 quarters of the year.
It was shocking to see that taxpayers' monies were being spent on the most ridiculous of things at the most ridiculous of prices. And I think it was most painful to realize that this kind of ridiculous spending was happening at a time where, the government has been firm, with the Nigerian people, to the extent that it's advised the Nigerian people to tighten its belts, to cut its cost of living, to live by its means, and inadvertently, by its policies, have actually pauperized many Nigerians and has actually shrunk the spending power of many Nigerians. And then to then realize that politicians, are living their best lives on what was supposed to be the meager resources of the state, I think it was not just disappointing for us to realize. I think it was also very shocking. Listen, if politicians can spend this kind of money at this time of our country, then I think that it shows a level of callousness beyond insensitivity that is difficult for me to relate to. Because you cannot turn around. For instance, the Lagos state government, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, has cut its so-called subsidy on public transportation. Was it 50% that it initially was offering the citizens of the state? Now, it's been unable to sustain that subsidy, even though nothing has happened to the wages of the people in the last 3 months that this subsidy program was implemented, even though nothing has happened to the fundamentals in terms of the price shocks and inflation that has happened in the last 6 months. It decided to pull back on those subsidies, the only subsidy it had given citizens in Lagos State, because it claims that it cannot continue to afford those subsidies. But this same government turns around to spend 400 million on an SUV,
they're renovating a church for 500 million naira. They're buying diffusers for 7 million naira. They are, of course, giving the deputy governor's wife 30 million naira every month. It's a ton of things that are just there. Let me share something just before we have you go on. Let me share something. There's something here that says provision of support for the support services for the multi-biometric search services, MBSS platform for the deployment of disaster recovery site and upgrade of database infrastructure from 10 million to 20 million. It's at 7.9 billion naira. Now, this is his reaction, and it's pretty interesting what he said here. He says, this single award of approximately 8 billion naira to a single vendor in comparison to the entire 2023 expenditure budget for this same agency, the LASRRA, which is about 3.2 billion. The award alone is about 2.5 times the entire 2023 LASRRA budget and calls for greater scrutiny. So, I mean, it basically just paints a picture into, the way that money seems to just be wasted, on the state level here in Lagos. And I'm sure it's not the same thing. It's not different, across Nigeria.
And also,
Yes.
Go ahead.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to I want you to answer that, and then I'll make reference to the next one.
No, listen, I think that Lagosians are rightfully outraged by this kind of spending that was revealed, yesterday, and rightfully so. Every taxpayer, every citizen should be outraged that at this very, very difficult period in our country, politicians are spending monies ridiculously, with such insensitivity, with such impunity, with such lack of accountability. And it should gravely worry us that they have the temerity to carry on like this, without any sort of supervision, even from the State Houses of Assembly, and without the conscience, the moral conscience, to admit that it's the incompetence and the poor management of the economy by this political party that has brought the country to the point where it is today. And in fact, by the admittance of certain senior officials of this government, and then to turn around and spend state resources in the manner that it is just spent in just the last 2 quarters, I think it's really shocking and disappointing. And I think the outrage that you see, by public commentators, by citizens, I think are rightly placed. And I think again that, for some reason, the Nigerian people are lucky, Nigerian politicians are lucky to have the kind of citizens that they have. Because if this was any democracy across the world, people would have been resigning by this morning.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to just quickly ask you, I want to highlight two other points. There's so many ridiculous items on this agenda that we cannot look through, but this one is for the Office of the Deputy Governor. Monthly outreach of indigent citizens by wife of the Deputy Governor to the tune of 30 million. Monthly empowerment programs of the wife of the Deputy Governor to the tune of 30 million naira. And provision of supply items, that is rechargeable fans, rechargeable lights, and fridge in the office of the Deputy Governor to the tune of 2 billion naira. This award obviously it deserves further scrutiny. So what will be the next point of call? Seeing as this budget is a budget that covered from earlier in the year to September, we're already in November. Is there any way out of this? What does it say of the National Assembly, and what is the expected response from the government to this?
Well, I mean, these monies have been spent. It would appear that these monies have been spent already, right? And it would appear clearly that proper oversight was not exercised by the State House of Assembly for these kinds of monies to have been spent. And of course, I expect that the state government will come and give us, some excuses why those monies had to be spent in the manner that it was spent. You're likely to get a response today or tomorrow. Whether that response holds water is neither here nor there. But I think that the most important factor here is how citizens respond to this profligacy by the state government, or the government that taxes them and the government that punishes them when they err. And so it is how citizens respond to this revelation that will be the most important factor here. Because democracies only improve when citizens have the courage to raise their governments to a certain standard. And if citizens lack the courage to raise or hold their governments to a certain standard, impunity will continue to fester. And let me add that for some reason, we practice a peculiar brand of followership in Nigeria, and a followership that I argue has been reinforced by the idea that progress as an individual does not come from the government. Nigerian people believe that their progress is tied to their faith in God, whether you're a Christian or Muslim, and that their success is not tied to the action or inactions of government. And to that extent, they are unable to then hold their governments accountable to deliver the dividends of the democracy that they were elected for, because they think that they can fast and pray and secure progress for their lives. Let me just quickly stress that a few years ago in San Diego in Chile, millions of people were on the streets to protest for weeks because the government increased the cost of public transportation by 4%. Chileans have a GDP per capita of close to $18,000. Last year, the French were on the streets for weeks protesting because of pension reforms and because Emmanuel Macron was going to increase the retirement age. And the French citizens, who have a GDP per capita of close to $45,000, were on the streets for weeks protesting that decision. In Israel earlier this year, because of certain judicial reforms that Netanyahu was about to pursue that the citizens did not agree with, the citizens were on the street for 30 weeks demanding a reversal of that policy. Might I add that the GDP per capita of Israelis is $58,000. Please explain to me how it is possible that a country with a GDP per capita of $2,000, as poor as we are as a country, will tolerate the kind of profligacy, the kind of irresponsible spending that we have continued to see as these revelations continue to unfold. And like you rightfully said, this is not just a Lagos affair, it's a national affair.
Absolutely.
So how is it possible that a country as poor as ours can tolerate this level of impunity? And the reason it continues to happen is because there are no political consequences for this impunity,
And
nobody held to account.
Mr. Adio, I agree with you that indeed there are no consequences. We've seen things like this happen time and time again. Conversations about budget padding aren't new to our country. But what exactly is done about it? It seems like we make a lot of noise. There's a lot of, rumbling and noise and ruffling of feathers on social media, and that's about where it ends. What exactly will be made of this report? I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. But thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts. We hope that the government is listening and that the rightful moves are being made in this regard. Do have a wonderful day.